According to Harlem oral history, there was a night in 1928 when a 21-year-old with nothing but his words walked into a room with a killer and walked out as a king. The story goes like this. September 14th, 1928, Dutch Schultz's office in the Bronx, 11:47 p.m. Bumpy Johnson, 21 years old, received a phone call the night before. A voice he didn't recognize said, "Mr. Schultz wants to meet you. Tomorrow night. Come alone." Then the line went dead. In Harlem, everyone knew what that meant. Dutch Schultz didn't invite people to meetings. He summoned them to judgment. You either left as his employee or you didn't leave at all. Legend has it that Bumpy told his girlfriend where he was going and said, "If I'm not back by 3 a.m., I'm not coming back." But he went anyway. To understand why this meeting mattered, you need to understand who these two men were in 1928. Dutch Schultz was 26 years old. He controlled the numbers racket in the Bronx and most of Manhattan. He made $20 million a year, and he'd personally killed 17 men who got in his way. When Dutch wanted something, he took it. When people resisted, he made examples of them. Vincent "Mad Dog" Call tried to compete with Dutch in 1927. Dutch shot him 11 times and left his body in the street with a note. This is what happens when you disrespect Dutch Schultz. By 1928, Dutch wanted Harlem. He wanted to control all the numbers operations, force every independent operator to work for him or die. Most operators folded immediately. A few resisted, and one of them was getting noticed. Bumpy Johnson. According to the elders who tell this story, Bumpy wasn't powerful in 1928. He was just a young hustler running numbers on 3 blocks in East Harlem. But people trusted him. He paid out winnings fairly. He protected his customers. He built loyalty. Dutch heard about this young upstart who was refusing to fold, so Dutch made a decision. Bring him in. See if he's worth keeping or worth killing. The story goes that Bumpy walked into Dutch's office at exactly 11:47 p.m. The room was smoke-filled, 1 desk, 2 chairs, and a gun sitting on the desk, pointed at the empty chair. Dutch Schultz sat behind the desk. His bodyguard stood in the corner with a shotgun. His accountant stood beside him. They tell it that Dutch didn't stand up, didn't shake Bumpy's hand, just pointed at the chair. "Sit down." Bumpy sat. The gun was 3 feet from his chest. "You know why you're here?" "Yes, Mr. Schultz." Dutch leaned forward. "I'm taking over Harlem. Everyone works for me now. You work for me or you're done. You got 2 minutes to decide." People say that Bumpy looked at the gun, looked at Dutch, and then did something nobody expected. He smiled. "Mr. Schultz, with respect, I don't think you understand Harlem." Dutch's hand moved toward the gun. "You got 1 minute left." According to the legend, Bumpy said this: "You could take Harlem by force, but you'd spend every day fighting resistance from 200,000 people who don't trust outsiders. You'd lose money fighting wars you don't need to fight. Or you could partner with me. I bring the operators to you peacefully. You get your percentage. No war, no resistance, just profit." The room went silent. Then Bumpy said, "I'm not threatening you, Mr. Schultz. I'm offering you something better than conquest. I'm offering you profit without bloodshed." Dutch studied him. Then Dutch did something that shocked everyone in the room. He put the gun away. "Talk. You got 3 hours. Convince me." And according to those who were there, Bumpy Johnson talked for 3 hours straight. The story of what Bumpy said that night has been told in Harlem for decades. The details vary depending on who's telling it, but the core arguments stay the same. Bumpy told Dutch that Harlem was different from the Bronx. "You're Italian, Mr. Schultz. The Bronx is Italian. You understand the culture, the respect, the systems. Harlem is black. You're an outsider here. You come in with force. You're the oppressor. and black folks in Harlem have been oppressed their whole lives. We know how to resist. Partner with me. I'm not an outsider. When I tell them to work with you, they'll do it. Because they trust me. They say Dutch listened without interrupting. Bumpy's second argument was about profit. Right now, you're spending money on violence, on enforcers, on putting out fires. Every week it costs you. Partner with me. I bring peace. We split the profits 60-40. You make more money with partnership than you'd make with conquest. Dutch's accountant leaned over and whispered something. Later, people would say the accountant told Dutch, "The kid's math is right." Bumpy's third argument was about legitimacy. Right now, you're the white gangster stealing from Harlem. That's your reputation. Partner with me. You become the businessman who respects Harlem, who gives Harlem a cut. And when people respect you, they protect you. They warn you about police. They make your life easier. Legend has it that Dutch stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the streets below, thought for a full 2 minutes in silence. Then he turned around and said, "Okay, here's the deal. According to Harlem oral history, Dutch Schultz made Bumpy Johnson an offer that shocked everyone. You get Harlem, all of it. You run the numbers. You manage the operators. I get 50% of profits. Not 60, equal partners. You use my name for protection. Any Italian tries to muscle in, you tell them you're with Dutch Schultz. I don't interfere with how you run things. As long as my 50% comes in every week, I don't care what you do. But if you steal from me, I kill you, personally. I want you to understand that." They say, Bumpy nodded once. Dutch walked over, extended his hand. "Harlem is yours to run." And according to legend, that handshake changed everything. The meaning of this story isn't about the deal itself. It's about what the deal represented. In 1928, white gangsters treated black criminals as tools. Expendable. Inferior. Not partners. Bumpy Johnson walked into that room with nothing but intelligence. And he walked out with a partnership, an equal partnership, 50-50. For the first time in New York's criminal history, a black gangster negotiated from a position of strength with a white mob boss. Not as a subordinate, as an equal. The consequences of that handshake shaped the next 40 years of Harlem. Within 1 week, Bumpy unified all the independent numbers operators in Harlem. He explained the deal. "We work together. Nobody gets hurt. We all make money." Within 1 month, Bumpy was running operations across 40 blocks, making $2,500 a week. In 1928, that made him one of the richest young black men in New York. But more importantly, Bumpy had Dutch Schultz's protection, which meant no Italian mob could touch him. Bumpy was untouchable. And Bumpy used that power differently than Dutch would have. He reinvested his profits into Harlem, paid for kids' school supplies, protected families from eviction, helped local businesses. The elders say that Bumpy became the gangster who cared about his community, the man who used criminal profits to help people the system ignored. The partnership lasted until 1931, when Dutch got arrested and had to focus on his legal troubles. By then, Bumpy didn't need Dutch's protection anymore. He'd built his own power. But the lesson remained. Intelligence beats violence. Strategy beats force. Words can be more powerful than guns. The message of this story, the reason it's still told in Harlem today, is this. Bumpy Johnson proved that even in a world designed to keep you powerless, intelligence creates opportunity. That when the system gives you nothing, you can negotiate for something. That respect is earned through competence, not fear. But this story also carries a darker truth. This is a story from 1928, a time when black people couldn't vote in most states, couldn't eat in most restaurants, couldn't get fair trials or equal opportunities. Bumpy Johnson had to negotiate with a criminal because legitimate power was denied to him. He had to build an empire in the underworld because the legal world wouldn't let him succeed. That's the tragedy at the heart of this legend. Bumpy Johnson's intelligence should have made him a lawyer, a businessman, a political leader. But America in 1928 didn't allow black men those opportunities. So Bumpy used his intelligence in the only place where it could thrive, the criminal underworld. And he became a legend not because crime is admirable, but because he survived and succeeded in a world determined to destroy him. The elders who tell this story always end it the same way. This is what happened when there was no justice, when the system failed people completely, when brilliance had nowhere to go except the streets. Bumpy Johnson walked into that room on September 14th, 1928, and negotiated his way to power. That's impressive. That's worth remembering, but it shouldn't have been necessary. A just world would have given Bumpy Johnson opportunities that matched his intelligence, would have let him build something legal, something that didn't require partnerships with killers. This is a story of survival, of intelligence, of a young man who refused to be crushed. But it's also a story of a broken system, of a time when brilliant black men had to become criminals just to have power. We tell this story to honor Bumpy's intelligence, but we also tell it to remember. This is what injustice creates. This is what happens when people are denied legitimate opportunities. This is a tragedy of a time without justice, not a blueprint to repeat. Dutch Schultz was killed in 1935, shot in a restaurant in Newark, died the next day. Bumpy Johnson lived until 1968, built an empire in Harlem, became a legend, proved that intelligence could beat violence in a world designed for violence. But according to those who knew him, Bumpy always said the same thing when people asked about his success. I did what I had to do to survive. In a better world, I wouldn't have had to do it. That's the real lesson of September 14th, 1928. Not that crime pays, but that injustice forces brilliance into dark places. Not that we should celebrate gangsters, but that we should build a world where people with Bumpy's intelligence can succeed without becoming outlaws. The handshake that night changed Harlem, but it shouldn't have been necessary. And that's why we tell this story. Not to glorify what happened, but to remember why it happened. And to make sure we build a world where it never needs to happen again. According to Harlem oral history, Bumpy Johnson walked into death's office with nothing but words, and walked out as a king. That's impressive. But in a just world, he would have been a king without ever meeting Dutch Schultz. Remember that. Honor the intelligence. Reject the necessity. That's the legend. That's the lesson. That's the truth they tell in Harlem to this day. If this story made you think about justice, intelligence, and survival, subscribe for more legends from a time when brilliance had nowhere to go but the streets. Drop a comment. What would you have done in Bumpy's situation? Walk into that room or refuse the meeting? Turn on notifications, because next week we're revealing how Bumpy Johnson and Malcolm X formed a friendship that protected the civil rights movement. A gangster and a revolutionary. A story nobody tells. Remember, Bumpy Johnson's intelligence should have made him a senator. Instead, it made him a legend. That's impressive, but it's also tragic. This is a story from a time without justice. Let's make sure we never go back to that time. Rest in power, Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson, the man who proved that intelligence survives even when the system tries to crush it.